Hi, I'm Dr. Kyla, paediatric dietitian, fussy eating specialist and mum of two. I'm the founder of the online Mealtimes memberships that help parents just like you experience a confident and guilt-free way of feeding children. I'm also a business owner, a hot cross bun lover, and my superpower is finding things that you cannot live without. In this podcast, I'm talking about feeding your family, along with a random selection of topics that tickle my fancy. Welcome to Mealtimes with Dr. Kyla.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today is part 2 of my Bali chat. If you missed it last week, I talked about things like the nanny that we used, the all-inclusive hotel that we stayed at, and why all-inclusive is so great for a tired parent brain. I talked a bit about food and my philosophy around food on holidays is very relaxed, and it means that I'm also very relaxed. And I touched on some of the things about the airport, dengue fever, Bali belly, those kinds of things. So today I'm going to talk more about some of the specific questions that I was asked, and lots of them are around like what sort of things should you take. It's really interesting because when I only had one child, she was younger, I was probably a more anxious parent. I took a lot of stuff, and if that is you and you want to take lots of things and it makes you feel good, then I am all for it. Previously I've taken things like the slumber pod, which is a tent for sleeping that you can put over your cot, and it keeps the room really dark, and I would 100% take that again if I had a baby or a toddler sleeping in a cot. This was the first time that my youngest actually slept in a bed overall, which I had planned to practice at home, but we didn't get the bed put together and we didn't have a mattress and all of that, so she actually slept in a bed for the first time in Bali. Now, when I'm talking about things like the slumber pod and the cot, I actually last time took my own travel cot. You can just check it if you have one that kind of packs up. I have the Baby Bjorn one, which I highly recommend if you don't have a travel cot, and I checked that as luggage, which means I paid for it. And I think when you're paying on some of the low cost airlines, you're paying $40 to $50 each way, but for me it was 100% worth it to have a cot that I knew, that we trusted, that we knew she could sleep in. Previously, the very first time we went, I just opted for a cot in the room, and it was set up for an infant, and she was 18 months old, and she was furious about being in this new cot, and she could very well have launched herself out of the cot, and so I was actually quite stressed about that. And I should have, in hindsight, just taken my own cot, which I did the second time. You can absolutely hire. There are some amazing hire places in Bali now where you can get them to deliver and set up in your room the kind of things that you want. But for the cost of hiring it and the cost of traveling with it, I actually just took my own last time. The rooms that we stayed in at Melia are double story, the kind of family room, and surprisingly quite dark. I think most hotel rooms that are smaller in Bali have like pretty solid curtains for blocking out light and sound, as compared to like some of the holiday destinations I've been to in Australia. This one was actually fine, and the windows were about 4 meters high, so there was no way I was using my alfoil or rubbish bags to block those out, so definitely wouldn't waste any time or money taking a block out blind. They're just too big to go, but would highly recommend hiring a slumber pod or borrowing a slumber pod if that's something that your baby likes, is a dark room. The other question was about a travel stroller. I took a travel stroller the first time. We used it a little bit in the airport, and that was pretty much it. Around the hotel, it was probably too bumpy, wobbly, hard to use. And if you were taking it out on the streets, the sidewalks and the paths are so poorly kept that you would probably tip your baby into a drain accidentally if you were trying to push a pram properly around the streets. So my advice is to not necessarily bother with the travel pram. I think a carrier is probably more helpful if you have a little baby. And actually, I kind of wish I had invested even this time around with a 3-year-old with one of the kind of shoulder strap seats that you can get. So it's like a seat that kind of sits on your hip, and one strap comes across the other side, and you carry them on your hip, but it just takes some of the weight out of their body so that you can carry them without fatiguing so quickly. I would have loved that actually this time, because the hotel grounds were quite big. Walking to the pool, we did do a lot of negotiations about carry walks, which essentially are walking some, carrying some. But I probably would not have taken a travel stroller again, and I definitely didn't this time. In terms of nappies, Clee's only in nighttime nappies at the moment, and I took my own just because I knew there would be a certain amount of nappies. We only needed 9 nights worth plus a couple of bonuses just in case, and I trust the absorbency of the ones that we use. But previously I have taken more and then run out and actually purchased the Mary's brand, which are available at most of the pharmacies. The great thing to keep in mind is there's actually a service called Gojek, so Gojek. It's an app, and you can ask people to buy you anything from the shops. Last time I was there, I actually forgot my toothbrush, and so for $2.50, I ordered and had delivered a Colgate toothbrush from the shop. So somebody gets your order, goes to the shop, comes on their motorbike and drops it off at your hotel. So you can absolutely do that with nappies as well. You want to size up a little bit. So I found that in the Bali nappies when Clee was 2, she was in the XXXL size as a 2-year-old. Interestingly, I actually forgot that hot tip in terms of using Gojek to order things, and I made my husband go out. Well, I didn't make him. He chose to go out and purchase some deodorant, but he got conned into quite an expensive scooter ride out, an expensive scooter ride back, and he ended up with an almost $20 bottle of deodorant by the time he paid for it all, when we could have actually just used Gojek. So my advice would be probably to take your own at least for nighttime, particularly those ones where you need a really good absorbency. The Mary's ones don't have the same fit or feel as the ones that you've probably got used to at home, but I think you could absolutely get by in the day with nappies that you buy there if space is a premium. Had some questions about probiotics, and it does go against our kind of standards around recommending specific products based on what I use. But what I will say is I did choose to use a probiotic. I don't normally take a probiotic, but I did take a probiotic for 2 weeks prior to leaving, and while we were there. I recommend choosing something with the SB strain or the Traveller's Diarrhea strain. There is a little bit of evidence around Traveller's Diarrhea, not a huge amount. I am pretty confident that what happened with the probiotics and the impact they had is mostly in my head, that I had, done what I needed to protect myself. I've been surprisingly good the last few times I've been. I have quite a sensitive stomach when I'm traveling, and I found that I was totally fine while we were there. So I would recommend that. I did give the kids some prior to leaving, but I didn't actually give it to them there because I find it hard to mix it in with things. I didn't want to take it to the breakfast buffet and be mixing it kind of in at the table. So they didn't have anything while they were there, and we were also fine. I feel like there's very little harm that you can do by taking a probiotic. Not necessarily a lot of benefit, but kind of low risk, potentially high reward if it works. So something worth considering. We took our insulated B-Box water bottles with us, and we filled them up with water from the minibar and then had them kind of by the pool. The days that we didn't take them out, I noticed the kids drinking a lot more in the evening, which obviously isn't helpful for kind of nighttime sleep. So we did make a real effort to take those bottles with us out by the pool so that they could be sipping on water all the time. One of the things that we discovered at the very end stages of our trip last year when Claire was 2, somebody gave us their kind of ring floaty, so the one that goes around your waist for her when they were leaving, and honestly it was the best thing that we could have used. It meant that she could still run around, use her arms, play with us, but be kind of independently floating in the ring while everyone else was playing. Now obviously, like 2-3-year-olds, I'm not leaving them in the pool by themselves, definitely don't want them unsupervised, but I did find that ring gave us a whole level of flexibility that other floaties didn't. I've tried all sorts of the vests and the arm ones, and these are the ones that my kids can get in and out of really easily and do like. So we actually took our own again this year. You can easily buy them from the markets, but so worth it for those kids who are kind of on the cusp of swimming but need a little bit of help. We also took our own pillows, and those of you who have followed me on social media for a little while know that I'm ridiculous about my pillow. I have now I can't even remember, I'll put it in the show notes, but a pillow that I have tried out many a pillow, spent many $100 on pillows, and finally found one that doesn't give me a neck ache in the morning. And I debated, like, do I take it, do I not? When we kind of weighed our bags just before we were getting ready, and I still had like 3 kilos, I was like, damn it, I'm absolutely taking my pillow. Because you just never can tell in a hotel. In fact, the pillows seemed fine, but I always think they're fine until I wake up the next morning and I have a neck ache, and I just didn't need that. So I took my own pillow. I also took pillows, the girls' own pillows with them, which was probably another level of unnecessary, except that Cleo still has that very first pillow, the really flat ones. So I knew if she had to sleep in a bed for the first time and use a pillow that was like the size of her head, we were going to struggle. And I'm really, really pleased that I took one each for them, especially not a lot of weight, but it definitely helped our sleep, I would say. Again, probably all in my head, but it's worth it. We also took a speaker for down by the pool or for in-room dance parties, and I'd highly recommend taking a Bluetooth speaker. Obviously, we weren't blaring Taylor Swift very loudly for others to be interrupted, but just enough for there to be a real magical feel about the holiday. So I'd highly recommend taking that. I packed kids' Panadol and kids' Nurofen and a kids' antihistamine just in case. Luckily, we didn't need to use it while we were there, but nothing worse than them coming down with a cold or something from the plane and you having to go out and buy something. Again, you could probably use Gojek for that. While we're talking medications, if you have a croup baby or a child who maybe has an early indication they might have asthma or they have the kind of that tricky cough regularly, I, for the last couple of years, have taken our Pred mix, our steroid mix. You need to keep it cold, so I packed it with an ice block, wrapped it in a couple of Ziploc bags and popped that in our carry-on. If it depends how much ice you have, obviously, in the container, you can put it in your regular suitcase, but ideally you want to pop it into the minibar fridge as soon as you can get there, so that you can keep it cold for as long as you can. I just think if you are used to managing your child's croup or asthma and there's a chance that they get that while they're there, they get that horrible cough where you're having to seek medical advice, but you know exactly how to manage it, you've managed it considerably at home, I think really handy to have that with you. So I took that with us, and thankfully we haven't had to use it, but I felt much calmer having access to that in our hotel room. Also, I took Aqua Ear. I'm not sure how much evidence there is, but I swear as a kid, Aqua Ear, the only holiday we went on where I didn't use Aqua Ear as a kid, I got an ear infection. So it's, again, probably all in my head. Those drops that really dry out some of the swimming pool water from your ears so that it's not kind of sitting in there. And we were quite religious about using that, which I think was definitely worthwhile. For babies or toddlers still in nappies, I also would recommend taking one of your nappy rash creams just to be safe. There's nothing worse than having to find another one when you're there, if you don't have to. I would recommend when you are packing your bags, packing some bathers for everybody in your hand luggage, so that if you do get to the hotel and your room's not ready, you can go by the pool. I would say have a think about taking a throw or wearing shoes that would work. We had an awkward walk down to the pool where I only had my bathers to wear, and my husband was walking in his boardies and his runners down to the pool because we didn't really have the look. But I mean, in the scheme of things, not a big problem at all. Just when you first get to a place, just waltzing around in just your bathers and your shoes is a different vibe, isn't it? We also took pool hats, which we used every day. So those ones that you can get wet easily. And in fact, we didn't use other hats at all. We just used the pool hats on repeat. So packing those, I think, is helpful. If you have a little baby, packing your own spoons or a size of a container that you would like to use for feeding them, I think can be really helpful, rather than trying to kind of scrounge around and find metal teaspoons. So packing those would be helpful. If you're washing things like spoons, plates, bottles, I would recommend taking detergent with you so that you can do a hot soapy wash. I do think when you're washing something like those, you can use the hot water with dishwashing detergent. You could obviously choose to boil the kettle and do it that way if you would prefer in the sink. One of the favourite things that we did do was pay for laundry. I don't know that it got the clothes particularly clean. I mean, As you might know, I am an avid user of Power of 4 detergent, and I can guarantee that this laundry place was not using that detergent. It did not have stain removal powers like I'm used to. But having somebody wash and pack the washing for me the day before we left was amazing. Really helpful for kind of washing a whole heap of, when you get halfway through the trip and you're through all your undies or your plain clothes need a wash. We paid $35,000 for a kilo of washing, so $3.50. I think all up, I did 2 big loads of washing and I paid less than $20 total for it to be all washed, folded. It has a really strong Bali laundry floral smell at the end that I could just breathe in all day. Really, really highly recommend. We literally just walked to the kind of market next to the hotel and they have a laundry service there. You can do it in the hotel, but you are paying per piece rather than, overall weight. They're my big kind of recommendations, or actually the things to take. Something else I recommend packing is a pair of scissors. That is my travel hack for all time. If you have scissors, there are just so many things that you might need to use scissors for. For example, if you haven't taken enough sunscreen and you have to cut the sunscreen bottle open and kind of use your fingers to scrape it out, scissors come in really handy for that. On that note, I would also recommend packing at least another container of sunscreen, more than you think you need. I did get up the night before we left and threw in another sunscreen, and I'm so glad we did because we were scraping the barrel by the last day, and there's nothing worse than trying to ration sunscreen on your kids. So definitely pack more sunscreen than you think. We took a little tube of aloe vera, which I found helpful because, of course, I'm busy applying it to everybody else and missed my shoulders on one day. So having that aloe vera, just take some of the guilt out of it for me. But I would recommend that for cooling. In terms of activities for the kids, we took quite a lot of little things this time. The things that were mainly used were, we took a set of plastic and silicone teacups, a teapot, a ladle, and a couple of little plates. And my 3-year-old just loved playing kind of restaurants and cafes and doing lots of tipping of water into one container into another. So having a little set like that for tipping and pouring, hugely popular in the pool. Every other kid gravitated over, to have a go with these. So I would definitely recommend packing something like that. We took a couple of pool style toys, so a few of the sinkies, just the gems or the sharks that kind of drop to the bottom just for a little bit of interest. We took a couple of little cars or boats that you could use in the water, which I think were, really helpful. We just took like a kind of Lego one and a couple of Lego characters, which were, just added another opportunity to play on the side of the pool. We took mermaid Barbies as well, so any kind of thing that was a hit with lots of kids as well, and it meant that the girls were able to make friends with their mermaid Barbies and the things that they wanted to play with other people. So having a few things to do was definitely helpful. Towards the end, I took a little blow-up beach ball, all very light things, and that was hours of fun for our 6-year-old. So playing this kind of keepy-uppy or volleyball or piggy in the middle was, she relished that, which she probably wouldn't have done a couple of years ago. Goggles, I think, if you've got a kid who wears goggles, no-brainer, definitely do that. We did take a lot of games, but we didn't really we played Spot It by the pool maybe once. We didn't use any of our other card games, which I wonder if that was the age of our kids, or that we weren't playing games with them so much. We were doing more in pool games, but we did take things like Sleeping Queens, Rat-a-tat-cat, but we didn't actually get them out. So up to you. The kids club had lots of activities that my kids were doing, so they were did marshmallow toasting, and there was a trampoline and a soccer goals and bracelet making, so there was plenty for them to do in the kids club rather than kind of games that we were playing with them. I mentioned in the last episode the Bali activity book that we used kind of most days, doing the diary and doing some of the activities in it. And we did take a couple of kind of activity style sticker books, which were great when you just needed a break from the pool, a little bit of a sit on the sun lounge. We did a little bit with kind of whiteboard markers and those kind of drawing pads, which were helpful too, just something to have in the bag, particularly at restaurants. At the restaurant when we're having dinner, could kind of take up a little bit of the time. If you have a child with long hair, and they're open to it, I would highly recommend getting their hair braided on the first full day that you're there with the Bali braids. I mean, that was a highlight of my childhood, coming back to primary school with Bali braids. And I had always asked Elsie if she was interested in doing it, and she absolutely has not been prior to now. But one of our little friends led the charge and did get it done. And honestly, having their hair braided out of their face for the entirety of the trip, not having to brush it, not having to detangle it, not having to disentangle the goggles from their hair, was just worth everything. Ended up, I'm sure we got taken for a ride, but it was worth every cent. We paid about $30 to have it done. It took just under an hour. Just the beads, no kind of extra extensions or anything. I can't imagine how those big, there's an option where you get kind of 2 big braids on the kind of sides of your head. I cannot imagine my child sleeping with that in their hair. So this, didn't affect her sleep in any way, and she's quite a sensitive kid, so she managed the process quite fine. I would highly recommend doing that at the start to minimise the faff. In terms of activities, other than what was going on in the hotel, we took the kids out to Waterbomb Park for the day, which again, I feel like I'm just recreating my own childhood memories. I remember so vividly going to Waterbomb Park as a kid, and honestly, it's only got better. We just had a lovely time. There's so much for the kids. The food is really reasonably priced. There's enough kind of sun lounges and day beds. I would absolutely recommend purchasing the tickets online the night before and getting there for the opening of the park at around 9 o'clock. We just booked the driver who did the transfer to the hotel. It cost us $25 for a car of 8 people to get over to Waterbomb Park, and we just spent the whole day there. He came back at 3. Cleo this year was brave enough to go on the kind of kid slides herself, and we actually took the nanny with us on that day, we didn't need her, but it was really nice to have somebody kind of, staying at the sun lounge if we were going off to the toilet, or waiting at the bottom to catch one of the kids if I was at the top, or kind of having tag team like that. But yeah, something to do for the whole family. We had a really great, going around the 4 of us on the lazy river was honestly just amazing. Would highly recommend. They do have a version called Splash in Canggu. I've heard that it's actually closing soon. So if you're going in the next little while, that might be a worthwhile one if you're closer. For us to get from Nusa Dua to Canggu, it's minimum an hour, maximum 3 hours. So it was much smarter for us to go to Waterbomb Park, which was really only 20-30 minutes away, in a nice air-conditioned car. So definitely that was a day out. We came back, had a very quiet afternoon, room service in the room, and early to bed. So that was our kind of one foray. We did have another day where me and my friend went out. We went to catch up with some of my friends who live in Bali, and we went to a healer in the morning, which was a super cool experience. If you're going with a girlfriend or a partner who is open to a Balinese healer, my husband is not, so he did not come with us. His name is Jimmy. He's actually an Australian guy who lives in Bali. He's one of the top ranked healers in the area. He does a combination of kind of like kinesiology, he kind of presses on pressure points and makes you kind of say affirmations and asks you about your pain and kind of what that tells you about your life and how you think. And I actually saw him last year when I was on a retreat, and I booked to go and see him again with my friend this time. She's never been to see anyone like that, and it was crazy. We had a good 45-minute car ride on the way back from there to go to lunch, and we just talked the entire time. And then he said this, and then he said, this, don't come down so hard on your husband, and then he said this pain represents, this, and you have this guilt and this parent guilt, and there was so much. I can't do it justice in a podcast episode. But if you do go to Bali, he's in the Kerikaban area, which is about 20 minutes from Canggu. It's just in his house. It costs $90 for an hour session, and he kind of goes through your pain points in your body and gives you these things to say and things to repeat after him. Seriously incredible. I obviously come from a very scientific background. I struggle with things that don't fit the research mold, but having something like this, it was really cool. And obviously I'm not going to change the way I do everything based on, something somebody says, but it was a super cool experience. And I know that almost everyone I know who's been to see this person found it really interesting and useful. So if you do want his details, I can send them to you as well. You can send me a DM, or I'll see if I can dig them up for the show notes as well. We had lunch at Shelter in Canggu, which was amazingly beautiful. What we ordered was almost turned out to be a pizza, which I wasn't super keen on. I thought I'd ordered something different, but it was honestly one of the most delicious things I have ever eaten. So highly recommend lunch at Shelter if you are in that area. We got a pedicure across the road, but it was pretty average, so I wouldn't recommend that. It did take us almost 2 hours to get back to Nusa Dua, so keep that in mind if you are doing any kind of travel out of the hotel. That's the big one. I think that's everything. Oh, actually, I did have a question which I wasn't quite sure about. Somebody asked about what to do about not putting their head under the water in the pool because they'd read that you can get meningitis from something like that. Now, that is not something that I have heard. It is certainly not something that I was worried about or stopped my kids putting their head under the water. My oldest, just is like a fish. She's under there all the time. I wonder if that's a throwback to kind of old Bali, where maybe, the pools weren't as well treated as they are. I know that our pool was absolutely doused with chlorine on a regular basis. And so I was pretty confident that actually nothing was growing in the pool. And it wasn't something I was worried about. It's not something that I have seen referenced anywhere on the kind of Smart Traveller website or any kind of government recommendations about that. So I think if you're staying at a reputable place, it is probably not something you need to stress about. Okay, that is me done. I hope those recommendations are helpful to you if you are traveling to Bali. I would love to hear your feedback about the episode. I'll put a few things on social media as well. If there's any other questions that you've got, feel free to send me a message and I can do my best to answer them. Thanks for listening. See ya.
A huge thanks for tuning in and listening to my podcast. This is all brand new for me, so I'd love to hear your feedback. Give me a review or send me a DM. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And above all, I'd really love you to hit that subscribe button to keep listening. Thanks.